Jake Morrison stood at the edge of the Great Council chamber aboard New Geneva Station and watched 12 alien races debate humanity's fate. The massive circular room floated in space above Earth's moon and served as the heart of the Galactic Confederation. For 40 years, humans had worked here as mediators and engineers and problem solvers, but today felt different. The Zeltharian Chancellor Vextar rose from his crystalline seat, and his 4 arms gestured dramatically. His voice carried the authority of a species that had mastered faster than light travel when humans still used wooden ships. "The time has come to purify our great confederation," he announced, and his words echoed through the chamber's translation systems. "We must require all member species to demonstrate true technological advancement or face removal from our ranks." Jake felt his stomach drop, because everyone knew this law targeted humanity. The other 11 species possessed technologies that seemed like magic to most humans. The Krillians could manipulate matter at the atomic level. The Vegans had mastered biological engineering beyond anything Earth scientists dreamed of. The Andromedans traveled between dimensions as easily as humans crossed streets. Yet for decades, these advanced beings had relied on human engineers when their miraculous technologies broke down. Humans somehow understood the gaps between theory and practice that stumped alien minds. When Krillian matter manipulators jammed, humans fixed them. When vegan biosystems developed unexpected mutations, humans found solutions. When Andromedan dimensional gates destabilized, humans made them stable again. Dr. Lisa Chen stepped forward from the human delegation, and her voice remained steady despite the hostile atmosphere. "Honored council members," she began, "humanity offers value beyond pure technological achievement. We have maintained your infrastructure across 200 worlds. We have resolved 17 major conflicts between member species through diplomatic mediation. We have increased efficiency in your manufacturing systems by an average of 30%. The Vegan representative Zarthul made a dismissive sound through his breathing apparatus. "These are the tasks of servants, not equals," he said coldly. "Any species can be trained to follow maintenance procedures. We need members who contribute original innovations, not mere technical assistance." Jake wanted to shout that humans had developed most of the maintenance procedures the aliens now took for granted. Human engineers had spent years studying alien technologies and creating the step-by-step processes that kept everything running. But he knew the council would not listen. Chancellor Vexatar continued his presentation with growing enthusiasm. "The purity doctrine will elevate our confederation to new heights," he declared. "No longer will we carry the burden of primitive species who contribute nothing but basic labor. Each member must prove their worth through advanced scientific achievement." The holographic display showed humanity's contributions over 4 decades. Thousands of successful repairs on systems other species had given up on. Hundreds of diplomatic solutions to conflicts that threatened galactic peace. Dozens of efficiency improvements that saved the Confederation billions of credits annually. The data meant nothing to minds that valued theoretical elegance over practical results. Dr. Chen tried one more approach. "The quantum resonance stabilizers that keep this very station operational were designed by human engineers," she said. "The atmospheric processors on 30 agricultural worlds use human modifications to alien technology. The communication networks that connect our far-flung colonies rely on human-developed protocols to bridge incompatible alien systems. Primitive modifications of superior technology," scoffed the Tau Cedian delegate. "Any competent engineer could replicate such simple adaptations, given time." The irony struck Jake forcefully because none of these species had managed to replicate human work despite having centuries to study it. When their systems failed, they always called for human technicians. When their colonies faced crisis, they always requested human mediators. When their grand projects stalled, they always needed human problem solvers. The vote proceeded with mechanical precision. Each species announced their decision through the translation system. The Krillians voted to approve the purity doctrine. The Vegans agreed enthusiastically. The Tau Cetians supported the measure. One by one, 11 species voted to expel humanity. From the Confederation they had helped build and maintain, only the Andromedans abstained, and their representative looked genuinely troubled by the proceedings. "We believe this action may have unforeseen consequences," the Andromedan delegate said quietly. But the warning fell on deaf ears. Chancellor Vextar smiled with satisfaction as he announced the final tally. "The motion passes 11 votes in favor, with 1 abstention," he declared. "The human species has 6 standard months to vacate all Confederation territories and cease all activities within our space. This council session is now concluded." Jake received the formal expulsion notice through his personal communicator, and the legal language felt cold and impersonal. Humanity had 6 months to pack up 4 decades of infrastructure and expertise and leave the galaxy they had helped unite. The alien delegates filed out of the chamber talking excitedly about their bright future without human interference. None of them seemed to understand what they had just lost. None of them realized that the steady, competent hands maintaining their civilization were about to disappear. Jake looked through the observation window at Earth hanging in space below and wondered if the aliens would figure out their mistake before it was too late. The galaxy was about to learn the difference between creating advanced technology and keeping it running in the real world. As he walked toward the human delegation's quarters, Jake passed maintenance panels that human engineers had redesigned for optimal efficiency. He saw communication arrays that used human protocols to coordinate 12 different alien languages. He noticed environmental systems that relied on human modifications to support multiple species simultaneously. The aliens had voted to remove humanity from their perfect confederation, but they had no idea how deeply human expertise was woven into everything they took for granted. In 6 months, they would find out. Captain Ryan O'Sullivan watched the massive evacuation fleet assemble near Jupiter's orbit and felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. 300 ships of every size and design waited to carry humanity away from the homes they had built across the galaxy. The Exodus would be the largest movement of people in human history, but the aliens barely seemed to notice. Ryan commanded the civilian transport Perseus, and his manifest showed 8,000 colonists from the Vega system returning to Earth. These people had spent their entire lives on distant worlds working as engineers and technicians and mediators. Now they packed their belongings into cargo containers and prepared to abandon everything they had built. The communication channels buzzed with reports from evacuation coordinators across Confederation space. Every human settlement was shutting down in the same methodical way. People loaded personal items onto transports while leaving behind the infrastructure they had spent decades perfecting. The aliens wanted them gone so they would leave, but they would take their expertise with them. On the mining world, Kepler 442b maintenance chief Amy Rodriguez supervised the shutdown of the quantum extractors that had operated without failure for 30 years. The massive machines pulled rare elements from the planet's core using technology the Krillians had invented but could never keep stable. Human engineers had developed the maintenance protocols that made reliable operation possible. Amy watched Krillian supervisors dismiss her carefully prepared handover documentation. "We understand our own technology perfectly," declared Mining Director Kexnar with obvious irritation. "Human modifications were unnecessary complications that we will remove once you depart. The quantum extractors required precise calibration every 72 hours to prevent cascade failures. Amy had written detailed procedures explaining how to detect the early warning signs and make the needed adjustments. The Krillian engineers insisted they could handle everything using their original operating manuals. Amy knew the original manuals were incomplete because Krillian scientists focused on theoretical principles rather than practical implementation. The extractors worked beautifully in laboratory conditions, but real-world operation created variables that theory could not predict. Human engineers had spent years learning to read the subtle signs that indicated brewing problems. She removed the human-developed diagnostic equipment and disabled the automated warning systems that had prevented dozens of potential disasters. The Krillians had insisted these safety measures were primitive additions to their elegant design. Amy left behind only the basic controls that came with the original installation on the agricultural world, New Eden. Dr. Kevin Walsh oversaw the deactivation of atmospheric processors that had transformed a barren planet into a garden paradise. The terraforming technology belonged to the Vegans, but the processors had never worked properly until human engineers redesigned the control systems. The vegan colonists gathered to celebrate humanity's departure, and their speeches praised the coming era of pure vegan administration. Colony Administrator Morval announced plans to optimize the atmospheric processors using proper biological principles instead of crude human mechanical approaches. Kevin had tried to explain that the processors required constant micro-adjustments to maintain the delicate balance needed for agriculture. The vegan design assumed perfect biological harmony, but real ecosystems were messy and unpredictable. Human engineers had developed hybrid controls that combined biological monitoring with mechanical precision. The vegans refused to learn the human control protocols and insisted their superior understanding of biological systems made such crude methods unnecessary. Kevin disabled the human monitoring networks and removed the mechanical backup systems. He left detailed manuals explaining the hybrid approach, but knew the vegans would ignore them. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds. Human engineers quietly removed their modifications and disabled their safety systems and withdrew their expertise from critical infrastructure. They left behind instruction manuals and documentation, but these required the kind of intuitive problem-solving that humans excelled at. The aliens celebrated their liberation from human dependence without understanding what they were losing. They saw human engineers as glorified maintenance workers who followed procedures without truly comprehending the technology they serviced. The idea that humans might understand their systems better than they did seemed impossible. Captain Ryan received regular updates from evacuation teams across Confederation space. The reports followed the same pattern everywhere. Aliens eagerly took control of human-maintained systems while dismissing warnings about potential problems. They assumed their advanced knowledge made human expertise irrelevant. Communication networks that connected distant colonies used human-developed protocols to bridge incompatible alien technologies. The Tau Setians, who now controlled these networks, insisted they could improve efficiency by removing unnecessary human additions. They had no idea that the protocols prevented data corruption between different alien systems. Environmental control systems on space stations and orbital habitats relied on human modifications to support multiple alien species simultaneously. The original designs worked perfectly for single-species environments, but multi-species installations required careful balancing that only human engineers understood. Manufacturing facilities across the galaxy used human-developed quality control procedures to maintain production standards. Alien engineers focused on theoretical optimization, while humans had learned to spot the tiny variations that indicated brewing problems. Without human oversight, quality would slowly degrade in ways that seemed minor until systems failed catastrophically. Ryan watched Earth grow larger through the Perseus viewports as the evacuation fleet approached home. Behind them, they left a galaxy that thought it no longer needed human help. The aliens had their advanced technology and their superior knowledge and their pure confederation. But technology was only as good as the people who maintained it, and the aliens were about to discover that theoretical understanding differed greatly from practical expertise. The galaxy they thought they knew so well was actually held together by human knowledge and human solutions and human dedication. The exodus proceeded with quiet dignity as millions of humans returned to Earth after decades among the stars. They brought with them 40 years of experience working with alien technology and solving alien problems. They understood the galaxy's infrastructure better than any other species because they were the ones who actually kept it running. Ryan filed his final report as the Perseus entered Earth's atmosphere and prepared for landing. The evacuation was complete, and humanity had left Confederation space exactly as requested. The aliens now had their pure galaxy free from human interference. Soon they would discover what they had really given up when they dismissed humanity's value and demanded their departure. The galaxy was about to learn the difference between owning advanced technology and understanding how to keep it working when things went wrong. 3 months after the human exodus, the first problems appeared on Proxima Prime, and Krillian Chief Engineer Zekmor stared at readouts that made no sense. The fusion reactors that had operated flawlessly for decades were experiencing power fluctuations that followed no logical pattern. The diagnostic systems showed everything working within normal parameters, but the energy output varied unpredictably. Zekmor consulted the maintenance manuals left behind by human engineers and followed every procedure exactly as written. The instructions were clear and detailed and covered every standard maintenance task. But the reactors continued their erratic behavior, and the manuals contained no explanation for the current symptoms. The Krillian engineering team ran complete diagnostic cycles and found no mechanical problems. Every component tested within acceptable ranges, and all safety systems reported normal operation. Yet the fusion reactions fluctuated in ways that violated basic principles of atomic physics, as the Krillians understood them on Earth. Colonel Steve Baker received the first desperate communication from former human colonies through channels that officially did not exist. The atmospheric processors on New Eden were failing, and Vegan engineers could not understand why their biological controls were not working properly. The message came from a human colonist who had remained behind with special permission to care for elderly relatives. He reported that the atmospheric processors were producing oxygen at inconsistent rates, and carbon dioxide levels were beginning to rise. The Vegan administrators insisted their biological monitoring systems showed perfect balance, but the actual air quality contradicted their readings. Steve forwarded the report to Dr. Lisa Chen, who had established an unofficial monitoring network to track conditions in former human territories. The data painted a troubling picture of systems failing across the galaxy in ways that alien engineers could not explain or predict. The quantum extractors on Kepler 442b had shut down completely, after a cascade failure that destroyed 3 of the 12 extraction units. Krillian engineers found the damaged equipment in a state that their manuals described as impossible. The failure pattern suggested a resonance cascade, but their calculations showed such an event could not occur, Mining Director Kexnar demanded. Explanations from his engineering staff, but they could only point to the maintenance procedures they had followed exactly as the humans had written them. The procedures were clear about routine maintenance tasks, but contained no information about the early warning signs that human engineers had used to prevent cascade failures. Ambassador Elena Vasquez received a quiet visit from the Andromedan, representative who had abstained from the expulsion vote. The meeting took place in an unofficial capacity at a neutral station near the edge of human space. The Andromedan looked troubled and spoke carefully about technical difficulties that his people were experiencing. "Our dimensional gates are becoming unstable," the Andromedan admitted. "The fluctuations follow no pattern we can predict, and our engineers cannot determine the cause. We have studied the human documentation, but it assumes knowledge that we apparently lack." Elena listened to reports of similar problems affecting Andromedan colonies across their territory. Transportation networks that had operated reliably for centuries were now subject to random failures that stranded travelers and cargo. The Andromedans had always prided themselves on their mastery of dimensional physics, but they were discovering gaps in their understanding across the Galaxy Confederation. Council members received increasingly urgent reports from their home worlds. Space elevators experienced structural stress that should have been impossible according to their design specifications. Climate control systems on terraformed worlds drifted out of parameters despite following all maintenance protocols, exactly communication. Networks suffered mysterious outages that interrupted trade and diplomacy between member species. The problems seemed random and unconnected, but they were accelerating in frequency and severity. Technical teams from different species compared notes and found similar inexplicable failures occurring throughout Confederation space. Chancellor Vextar dismissed the reports as temporary setbacks that would resolve themselves once alien engineers had time to optimize systems without human interference. These minor difficulties prove only that human modifications were unnecessary complications, he announced to the Confederation Council. Superior engineering will soon eliminate these transitional problems, but the problems were not minor and they were not transitional. The fusion reactors on Proxima Prime suffered a complete shutdown that left the industrial world without power for 6 days. Emergency backup systems failed in sequence because they relied on the same quantum resonance patterns that human engineers had stabilized through modifications the Krillians had dismissed as primitive environmental systems on orbital. Habitats began producing toxic gas mixtures that forced evacuations of 3 major stations. The life support designs worked perfectly for single-species environments, but multi-species installations required careful balancing that only human engineers had understood. Manufacturing quality declined across multiple worlds as production systems generated increasing numbers of defective products. Alien engineers could not identify the cause because their focus on theoretical optimization had never included the practical variations that human technicians monitored constantly. The Great Library World of Alexandria reported temperature fluctuations that threatened millions of years of collected knowledge. The climate control systems used biological and mechanical and energy-based components that required coordination between multiple alien technologies. Human engineers had developed the integration protocols, but the aliens had insisted these were unnecessary complications. Dr. Monica Rivera led a team of human scientists on Earth in analyzing the reports that filtered back through unofficial channels. The pattern was clear to anyone who understood how the galaxy's infrastructure actually worked. The aliens were discovering that their advanced technologies required constant human expertise to function in real-world conditions. They built beautiful theoretical frameworks, Monica explained to her research team, but they never learned to handle the gap between theory and practice. Human engineers spent decades filling those gaps with practical solutions that kept everything running smoothly. The Confederation faced its first external threat in centuries as automated border defense. Systems began failing to respond to Ravager fleet probes. The defensive networks used integrated technologies from multiple species and required the kind of hybrid expertise that only human engineers possessed. The early warning systems that had protected Confederation space for decades were designed by humans who understood how to make different alien technologies work together effectively. Without human maintenance, these systems were reverting to their original incompatible states and losing the ability to coordinate defensive responses. Chancellor Vextar finally acknowledged that the Confederation faced serious technical difficulties, but he refused to admit that expelling humanity had been a mistake. Instead, he demanded that member species work harder to solve the problems and threatened punishment for any who suggested contacting Earth, but the problems continued to multiply and accelerate as systems throughout the galaxy discovered they could not function without the human expertise that had been dismissed as primitive and unnecessary. The aliens were learning that theoretical knowledge and practical understanding were very different things. 6 months after humanity's departure, the great space station Olympus suffered a catastrophic failure that shook the entire Galactic Confederation. The artificial gravity generators that had operated perfectly for 2 centuries suddenly destabilized and created chaotic gravitational fields throughout the massive structure. Emergency teams from multiple species worked desperately to understand what had gone wrong. But the quantum resonance patterns made no sense according to any alien scientific theory. The gravity fields fluctuated wildly between crushing acceleration and dangerous weightlessness. Entire sections of the station became uninhabitable as the environmental systems could not compensate for the gravitational chaos, Commander Alex Pierce watched the crisis unfold from Earth's monitoring stations and felt no satisfaction in seeing his predictions come true. The reports flooding in from across the galaxy painted a picture of infrastructure collapse that threatened billions of lives. The problems had escalated far beyond simple maintenance issues. The Tau Ceti shipyards that produced 60% of the Confederation fleet went completely dark when their automated systems crashed in a cascade failure that spread through every manufacturing facility. The shipyards had operated continuously for 300 years, using integrated technologies from 7 different species. Tau Cetian engineers discovered that the human modifications they had dismissed as primitive additions were actually critical. Integration protocols that allowed incompatible alien technologies to work together. Without these protocols, the systems were reverting to their original isolated states and losing all coordination. Dr. Monica Rivera coordinated Earth's response to desperate requests for technical assistance that came through unofficial channels. The requests violated the expulsion order, but human scientists could not ignore the humanitarian crisis developing across the galaxy. The gravity generators on Olympus use quantum resonance to create stable gravitational fields, Monica explained to her emergency response team. The resonance patterns require constant micro-adjustments that human engineers programmed into automated systems. Without those adjustments, the fields become chaotic. The Confederation Council met in emergency session aboard a backup station because Olympus had become too dangerous to occupy. Representatives from member species argued frantically about solutions while their worlds faced increasing system failures. The great library world of Alexandria lost environmental control, and temperatures began rising toward levels that would destroy irreplaceable archives. The climate systems used a complex integration of biological processors and mechanical controls and energy regulators that required coordination between vegan and Krillian and Tau Cetian technologies. Each species understood their own contribution perfectly, but none understood how the human engineers had made the different systems work together as a unified whole. The integration protocols existed in documentation, but required intuitive problem-solving skills that the aliens lacked. Agricultural worlds throughout the galaxy faced starvation as farming automation networks shut down permanently. The terraforming systems that had created garden paradises from barren rocks were failing in sequence as alien engineers proved unable to maintain the delicate balances required for life support. The vegan biological expertise worked perfectly in laboratory conditions. But real-world ecosystems created variables that biological theory could not predict. Human engineers had spent decades learning to read these variables and make the adjustments needed to keep terraformed worlds stable. Manufacturing quality collapsed across all member species as production systems generated increasing numbers of defective products. Quality control procedures developed by human engineers were dismissed as unnecessary monitoring, but without them, the systems could not detect problems until failures became catastrophic. The Ravager invasion fleet detected the growing chaos in Confederation space and launched their first major attack in centuries. The automated defense networks that had protected the galaxy failed to coordinate effectively as their human-developed integration protocols went offline. Border defense systems reverted to their original incompatible states and lost the ability to share targeting data or coordinate responses. Each species defended their own territory using their own technology, but the unified defense that had deterred major threats for decades no longer existed. Chancellor Vexitar's government faced rebellion from member species who blamed the leadership for creating the crisis by expelling humanity. The Chancellor refused to admit mistakes and instead demanded that alien engineers work harder to solve problems that were clearly beyond their understanding. The Krillian homeworld experienced massive industrial accidents as matter manipulation systems destabilized without human safety protocols. The elegant theoretical frameworks that governed atomic manipulation assumed perfect conditions that never existed in real-world applications. Vegan colony worlds faced biological disasters as terraforming systems created toxic environmental conditions. The biological expertise that seemed so advanced proved inadequate when dealing with the complex interactions between different planetary ecosystems. Captain Sarah Bennett commanded the exploration vessel Freedom as humanity ventured beyond their former territory and discovered new worlds free from Confederation influence. Earth's forced isolation had ended, but on humanity's terms with new allies who treated humans as equals rather than servants. The Andromedans formally broke ranks with the Confederation and requested Earth's assistance in exchange for sharing their dimensional travel technology. The Andromedan delegation arrived at Earth with genuine respect and offers of partnership rather than demands for subordinate assistance. President Frank Miller authorized limited humanitarian aid for the Andromedans while maintaining strict restrictions on assistance to species that had supported humanity's expulsion. Earth would help prevent civilian casualties, but would not repair the infrastructure damage caused by alien arrogance. The remaining Confederation forces discovered that their greatest warships were essentially defenseless against the Ravager attack. Weapon systems failed to calibrate properly, and shield generators operated at 30% efficiency. The quantum torpedoes that had been their most powerful weapons would not arm correctly, the military technology they thought they understood. Completely was actually human-adapted alien tech that required constant maintenance using protocols the aliens had never bothered to learn. Without human engineers to maintain the intricate modifications, the weapons were reverting to their original inferior performance. Communication networks throughout Confederation space suffered complete breakdowns as the integration protocols that connected different alien technologies went offline. Trade and diplomacy ground to a halt as member species lost the ability to coordinate effectively. Environmental disasters multiplied as life support systems on hundreds of worlds failed to maintain the complex balances needed for multi-species habitation. The elegant single-species designs worked perfectly in isolation, but real colonies required the hybrid expertise that only human engineers possessed. Chancellor Vextar's authority collapsed as member species abandoned the Confederation and attempted to contact Earth independently. Some offered complete technological exchanges, while others simply begged for basic assistance to prevent humanitarian disasters. The galaxy was learning that advanced technology meant nothing without the expertise to maintain it in real-world conditions, and that theoretical knowledge could not replace practical understanding when systems failed under stress that the original designers had never anticipated. The Confederation faced total collapse as critical systems failed across all member worlds, and Chancellor Vextar watched his perfect galaxy crumble from the Emergency Command Center on Backup Station Omega. The reports arriving hourly painted a picture of civilization unraveling at the most fundamental level. The Zeltharian homeworld evacuated its capital cities as climate control systems created massive storms that threatened to destroy the planetary government. The atmospheric processors that had maintained perfect weather for millennia were generating chaotic patterns that Zeltharian scientists could not predict or control. The elegant mathematical models that governed weather control assumed stable, atmospheric conditions, but real planetary systems included variables that theory could not account for. Human engineers had spent years learning to read atmospheric data and make the micro-adjustments that kept weather systems balanced. Mining. Operations throughout the galaxy shut down as quantum extractors suffered cascade failures that destroyed entire facilities. The Krillian matter manipulation technology worked beautifully in laboratory conditions, but real-world applications created resonance patterns that the original designers had never anticipated. Manufacturing worlds went dark as production systems failed in sequence. Quality control networks that had operated flawlessly for decades could no longer maintain the precision needed for advanced technology production. The theoretical optimization that alien engineers preferred proved inadequate when dealing with the tiny variations that accumulated into major problems. Captain Sarah Bennett watched the Freedom's sensors track the expanding zone of failed systems and felt amazement at the scope of the disaster. Earth's exploration fleets were discovering new civilizations beyond the collapsed Confederation, while the galaxy's former rulers struggled to maintain basic life support. The Freedom carried the first diplomatic mission from the newly formed Terran Alliance to establish contact with species that had never joined the Confederation. These civilizations showed genuine interest in human expertise and offered partnerships based on mutual respect rather than technological superiority. Sarah's reports described thriving colonies on worlds that Earth scientists had thought uninhabitable, and trade networks that operated efficiently without the complex bureaucracy that had strangled Confederation commerce. The galaxy beyond the former Confederation space was vast and full of opportunities for species that valued practical cooperation. The Andromedans completed their formal break with the Confederation and signed the Treaty of Luna that established the first equal partnership between humans and an advanced alien species. The Andromedan dimensional drive technology, combined with human engineering expertise, created transportation capabilities that surpassed anything the Confederation had possessed. Dr. Monica Rivera led the joint human-Andromedan research teams that were developing hybrid technologies impossible under the old system. The combination of theoretical knowledge and practical expertise produced innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. The agricultural worlds that had provided food for half the galaxy faced complete crop failure as terraforming systems destabilized beyond recovery. The biological expertise that vegan scientists possessed could not compensate for the environmental chaos created by failed climate control systems. Billions of beings faced starvation as food production collapsed and transportation networks proved unable to deliver supplies from the few worlds that still functioned. The elegant efficiency that had characterized Confederation society depended entirely on infrastructure that was now failing catastrophically. The Ravager invasion accelerated as their scouts reported the chaos developing throughout former Confederation space. The hostile fleet had waited centuries for such an opportunity and now launched coordinated attacks on multiple fronts, knowing that unified resistance was impossible. Defense systems throughout the galaxy reverted to their original incompatible configurations as the integration protocols developed by human engineers went offline. Each member species defended their territory using their own technology, but coordination between different defensive systems proved impossible. The quantum torpedo networks that had been the Confederation's primary deterrent would not calibrate properly without human maintenance protocols. Shield generators operated at reduced efficiency, and targeting systems could not share data between different alien technologies. Admiral Tony Rodriguez commanded Earth's expanding fleet of purely human, designed vessels that outperformed anything the old Confederation possessed. The ships used integrated systems that human engineers understood completely rather than adapted alien technology that required constant adjustment. The Terran Alliance fleet moved beyond Earth's solar system to establish defensive positions that protected human colonies and their new allies. The military doctrine emphasized cooperation between human tactical expertise and alien technological capabilities. President Frank Miller received desperate delegations from former Confederation members, who offered complete surrender in exchange for basic assistance. The president authorized humanitarian aid to prevent civilian casualties but refused to restore the infrastructure that alien arrogance had destroyed. The remaining Confederation government, now led by Vice-Chancellor Mordan, sent formal requests for technical assistance with offers of unlimited compensation. The requests acknowledged that human expertise was essential for maintaining advanced alien technology, but pride still prevented complete admission of error. Earth's response was delivered by former Ambassador Jake Morrison, who had once pleaded humanity's case before the same council that had voted for expulsion. The message was clear and simple. The old Confederation was finished, and any species seeking assistance must apply individually to join the new galactic order. Environmental disasters multiplied as life support systems on orbital habitats failed to maintain the atmospheric balances needed for multi-species occupation. The theoretical frameworks that governed environmental control could not handle the complex interactions between different biological requirements, space elevators throughout. The galaxy suffered structural failures as their control systems lost the ability to compensate for gravitational variations. The engineering calculations that had seemed so precise proved inadequate when dealing with real-world conditions that theory had not predicted. The great trade routes that had connected thousands of worlds collapsed as transportation hubs lost. The coordination protocols that allowed different propulsion technologies to work together safely. Interstellar commerce ground to a halt as species could no longer maintain the complex logistics networks that civilization required. Communication networks fragmented as the integration systems that had allowed different alien languages and technologies to interface properly went offline. The universal translation protocols that had enabled galactic diplomacy required human-developed coordination systems that the aliens had dismissed as primitive additions. Former Chancellor Vex Tar found himself reduced to a minor administrative position as the Zeltharian government collapsed under the weight of infrastructure failures. The proud leader who had championed alien superiority now worked under human supervisors who were trying to prevent complete societal breakdown. The Confederation. Council held its final session in the damaged remains of Station Olympus, where artificial gravity still fluctuated unpredictably. The formal dissolution vote was unanimous as member species abandoned the dream of technological purity in favor of survival. The galaxy had learned that theoretical knowledge and practical expertise were very different things, and that advanced technology meant nothing without the wisdom to maintain it properly. The price of dismissing humanity's value was the collapse of the civilization they had worked decades to build and maintain. 2 years after their expulsion, humanity emerged as the dominant force in their section of the galaxy, and Admiral Tony Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the flagship Endeavor, watching Terran Alliance vessels patrol space that had once belonged to the Confederation. The fleet consisted entirely of human-designed ships that incorporated the best aspects of alien technology without the compatibility problems that had plagued the old system. Earth had formed the Terran Alliance with species that treated humans as equals rather than servants. The alliance included the Andromedans, who had proven their commitment to genuine partnership, and several newly discovered civilizations that valued practical cooperation over theoretical superiority. The member species of the alliance contributed their unique strengths, while human engineers provided the integration expertise that made different technologies work together effectively. The result was a civilization that functioned more efficiently than the old Confederation had ever managed. Dr. Lisa Chen directed the Alliance Science Council from the research station New Horizon and oversaw projects that combined human practical knowledge with alien theoretical understanding. The hybrid technologies emerging from joint research programs exceeded anything either species could have developed alone. The dimensional drive systems that allowed Alliance ships to travel faster than anything the Confederation possessed used. Andromedan physics enhanced with human engineering refinements. The combination of theoretical elegance and practical reliability created transportation networks that operated without the constant failures that had plagued the old system. Agricultural worlds throughout Alliance space used terraforming systems that integrated vegan biological expertise with human environmental control protocols. The hybrid approach produced stable ecosystems that could support multiple species without the complex maintenance requirements that had made Confederation colonies so vulnerable. Manufacturing centers operated with quality control systems that combined alien precision with human adaptability. Production efficiency increased dramatically as human engineers developed protocols that could handle real-world variations while maintaining the theoretical standards that alien scientists demanded. The Ravager invasion that had threatened to Overrun, the collapsed Confederation territory met fierce resistance from Alliance defense networks that coordinated multiple alien technologies under human tactical control. The defensive systems worked together seamlessly because human engineers understood how to make incompatible technologies interface properly. Captain Sarah Bennett commanded exploration fleets that established contact with dozens of species beyond the former Confederation boundaries. These civilizations showed immediate interest in Alliance membership after witnessing the stability and prosperity that cooperation with humanity could provide. The exploration program discovered resource-rich worlds and trade opportunities that had been ignored by the Confederation's focus on technological purity. Alliance colonies expanded rapidly as human colonists worked alongside alien partners to establish settlements that benefited all member species. President Frank Miller received the formal delegation from the remnants of the Confederation government, and the meeting took place in the same chamber where humanity had once been expelled. The irony was not lost on anyone present, as former Chancellor Vextar now served as a minor aide to Vice Chancellor Mordan. The Confederation delegation offered complete technological exchanges and territorial concessions and full membership in any reconstituted galactic government if humanity would help rebuild what had been lost. The desperation in their voices was clear as they described the ongoing collapse of their remaining territories. Frank's response was delivered with the same dignity that Jake Morrison had shown during humanity's darkest hour before the Confederation Council. The Alliance would provide humanitarian aid to prevent civilian casualties, but the old Confederation was finished forever. Any species wishing to join the new galactic order must apply individually and demonstrate their commitment to equality and cooperation. There would be no special consideration for former Confederation members who had supported humanity's expulsion. The Alliance application process required applicant species to acknowledge the value of practical expertise alongside theoretical knowledge. They must accept human engineers as equals rather than servants and commit to genuine partnership in maintaining the complex systems that civilization required. Several former Confederation species completed the application process successfully and were welcomed into the Alliance as junior partners. They contributed their technological specialties while learning to appreciate the human skills they had once dismissed as primitive. The Krillians who applied for Alliance membership discovered that human engineers understood matter manipulation better than they did because humans had spent decades maintaining Krillian equipment that the inventors could not keep running. The partnership proved beneficial for both species as theoretical knowledge combined with practical expertise. Vegan biological scientists found that human environmental engineers could create stable ecosystems that pure biological approaches could not maintain. The hybrid systems that emerged from their cooperation supported more diverse life forms than either species had thought possible. Former Chancellor Vextar worked under human supervisors in the reconstruction efforts on his homeworld and slowly began to understand what his people had lost when they dismissed humanity's worth. The daily experience of watching human engineers solve problems that stumped Zeltharian scientists was a humbling education in the difference between knowledge and wisdom. The final scene played out in the rebuilt council chamber of New Geneva, station where the Terran Alliance held its first full session with representatives from 37 member species. The chamber used hybrid technologies that allowed every species to participate equally regardless of their biological or technological differences. Jake Morrison served as Alliance Secretary General and opened the session with words that echoed across the galaxy. This alliance exists because we value what each species contributes rather than dismissing what we do not understand. Our strength comes from cooperation, not competition, and our success proves that wisdom matters more than pure knowledge. They Charmaine. Alliance had grown to encompass 200 worlds and included species that the Confederation had never contacted. Trade networks operated efficiently using human integration protocols that allowed incompatible alien technologies to work together smoothly. Defense systems protected Alliance space using coordinated technologies from multiple species under human tactical command. The military doctrine emphasized cooperation and mutual support rather than the technological superiority that had made the Confederation. Brittle environmental systems on Alliance worlds maintained stable conditions for dozens of different species, using hybrid technologies that combined alien expertise with human practical knowledge. The successful multi-species colonies proved that cooperation could achieve what theoretical purity could not. Research programs throughout Alliance space developed innovations that surpassed anything the old Confederation had produced. The combination of alien theoretical understanding with human practical expertise created technologies that neither approach could have achieved alone. The galaxy had been transformed with humanity at its center, not through conquest, but through the simple recognition of their irreplaceable value. The species that had once dismissed human contributions now competed for the opportunity to work alongside human engineers and learn from their expertise. Former Confederation territory remained largely uninhabited as the surviving species struggled to maintain basic infrastructure without human assistance. The elegant technologies that had seemed so advanced proved useless without the practical knowledge needed to keep them functioning. The Terran Alliance represented a new model for galactic civilization based on mutual respect and practical cooperation rather than technological supremacy. The success of the Alliance proved that wisdom and adaptability were more valuable than pure theoretical knowledge. Humanity had found their place in the galaxy not as servants to superior alien races, but as equal partners in a civilization that valued what each species could contribute. The species that had overlooked humanity's value had paid the full price for their arrogance and would never again take human expertise for granted.